Thank you, everyone, for being here today on another episode of the Lift Your Shop podcast. Today, we have an amazing guest. We have David Eschbach out of the St. Louis, Missouri area. He has two shops out there. The Spirit One Automotive brand is what he's created out there. But a very interesting part is that both of these shops started a few months before kind of COVID got rolling. And so, if you wouldn't mind sharing just a little bit more about yourself, David, and how you got to kind of the point that we're at today.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, Kelsey, appreciate the time and inviting me onto this podcast. And it's truly a great honor to talk with you and your clients and those who follow your Facebook page. Those are people who are looking for coaching, looking for improvement, and that's the greatest people to talk with. Like you said, I'm here in St. Louis, Missouri. I've been in the industry about 30 years, my whole professional career. Everything from tier 1 and 2 manufacturers, those are people who supply the mainline assemblers of vehicles, GM, Ford, Chrysler, and so forth. I had the opportunity to own my own brake caliper remanufacturing company back in the 90s. Great crash course in how the factory works and then I've had the awesome honor, really, of developing and writing training curriculum for larger franchises, larger chains, and working with several independent shops, about 1,500 of them in the last 25 years. Also had the honor of training about 2,500 service managers as well. So I truly love the industry, and I truly love the people in the industry.
That's awesome.
After 30 years of doing all that, I figured it's time to be my own company. So we came back to St. Louis from Texas. I was down there for about 13 years. It was a great experience with two wonderful companies. And when I came back, I started doing some light consulting and some speaking engagements for some automotive organizations. But the fact of the matter is that doesn't pay a lot. I had to dive in a little bit further, and I went into something I had absolutely no idea of, and that was towing. Company came up for sale. I didn't want the company. I wanted the trucks. So I went in and purchased the trucks from the company and started doing something I had no idea what I was doing. But the good thing is that it was fairly passive income. I don't touch it much. And that's what I needed to do to continue to work in the consulting / coaching world. So I also knew I wanted to open repair facilities and put some of my own theories to the test. And so that was my next step. So as you know, in respect to Stephen Covey, we can start with the end in mind here and talk about the themes or the takeaways of my story going through opening these shops with COVID. And those three are really learning how to be a good leader, the character of a good leader, learning that marketing is an everyday event and not just when it's slow. And then ultimately learning that your personal health is the health of your business. So those are the three things that I really learned, and I'll share with you today as I kind of set the stage for myself. I started out in this venture at 50 years old. I've got a wife and 3 kids. I planned to build this empire a few years ago with no banks, no investors. And I know a lot of people out there have done the same exact thing I have. I'm not special. I don't have a 25-year business plan. I've got a 25-month business plan. Because even though 50 is not old, you can't sit there and say, well, in 30 years, I'll create this big, empire, because, in 30 years, I'll need to have created a big empire.
Yep.
I was looking at opening the shops. There's a couple of routes you can take to do this. And one thing I noted, and this isn't St. Louis specific, but this is specific to St. Louis. It's an old city. It has a lot of urban and urban fringe neighborhoods, very defined neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. And it also has a lot of suburban sprawl. But what happened during the sprawl into suburbia was that a lot of the retail services went out there with the growth of population. Um, I saw an opportunity. I didn't want to go into suburbia and fight it out with the big, quote unquote box stores, with the franchises, with the chains. I saw an opportunity in the urban fringe neighborhoods of St. Louis, of the neighborhood shop, the little 3 and 4 bay shops. I also found that you can buy those rather inexpensively in neighborhoods yet to gentrify.
Yep.
So for those number people out there, and you're wondering, well, how does he do this? The 3 and 4 bay shops are geared to do about 1.5 million a year. So they're not mega shops by any means. Mm-hmm. They also carry a little bit lower overhead, as I would if I was out in the county or in the suburbs. Now, when I started this venture, I'm going to kind of shoot off here for a second and add this because I think it's important. There are 5 stages to any business, and you can also relate this to your customers as well. And the 5 stages are obscurity. No one knows who the heck you are. Mm-hmm. Awareness. They know who you are. They've seen your sign. Need. They obviously need you. Change. This is the difficult one. Can you get them to change? And then recommend. And once they've experienced your service, will they recommend your services?
Yes.
So that's really what I lived by at that point. And if you have a customer list, it's a great exercise to do with your customer list. And you're going to have some obscure customers because there's going to be some customers you've never met before. Uh-huh. And this is really where the story begins. So I opened up my first shop in October of 2019. And it is in a park called the Benton Park neighborhood. And that's shadowed by Anheuser-Busch, the world headquarters, or the original one. So it is a city neighborhood. It is a upper middle class city neighborhood, but it's balanced by, other city neighborhoods that have yet to reach that level again. Mm-hmm. And to be honest with you, the Benton Park location fired right off. We clumsily, and I mean clumsily, opened the doors one morning at 8 a.m. And we figured, hey, we've still got about 2 weeks of remodeling and sprucing up to do. As we went into the building itself was vacant for 20, 25 years. And did everything. So we opened up clumsily at 8 a.m. on a Monday morning with the expectation that we'll spend about a week or two sprucing things up. And all of a sudden, the customers started coming. And we were busy since day one. Now, we did feel a little bit of a dip during the COVID time. And so for the purpose of the story, I will only come back to Benton Park briefly. Our second location was February of 2020. And that was in a community on the fringe of the city county line, a little township called Afton. Afton is St. Louis's oldest non-city neighborhood. It's a really strong, really proud community, and it's made up of working class people and working class people who understand the value of a dollar and working class people who have loyalty. The only problem is that there's 8 neighboring shops, and some of them have been open for over 50 years.
Okay.
So we had our work cut out for us to capture that loyalty. But I had a little bit of blind faith. And one of the pieces of this blind faith puzzle was location, location, location. Mm-hmm. The shop faced a 4-lane thoroughfare that hosted tens of thousands of cars a day. It was a major roadway connecting the city of St. Louis and the suburbs. And you might have to dub this because I just completely.
You're talking.
I'm going to come back after suburbs. Okay. So we paired the vast thoroughfare of cars to the great community of hardworking people, and we thought we've got to go at it here. Mm-hmm. From the beginning, we really played it like normal, like you would opening up a normal shop, because the world was operating at a normal pace at that point in time. So we invested into traditional advertising. We remodeled the interior while sprucing up the exterior. The winter temperatures don't play nice with exterior painting and things like that, but we did our best to get the doors open. And then before we knew it, and as quickly as it has seemed, as it has exited today's media, a virus entered the stage. Mm-hmm. And I do remember the exact day of listening to the radio in the shop. And it's one of those things, do you know where you were at? And I do. I was listening to the radio in the shop, and it was quiet in the shop that morning. And we had already heard about COVID in Europe. But that's Europe, that's way over there.
Yeah.
That's the problem. But on this morning, the news on the radio was talking about COVID in Washington State, possible infections throughout the West Coast. And that's when we knew COVID, whatever it was headed our way. I had just invested a fair amount of money into a venture I knew would be difficult. But now we were about to experience a transformation that will forever change the world. But let me take a quick pause at this point. I do know, Kelsey, that a lot of people had a great year during the COVID year, if you will.
Yep.
They had great business. Their businesses boomed. And it was obvious. Customers had time. Customers had free money with government checks and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
The problem was, if you go back to those 5 stages, we were still haven't even entered the obscurity stage.
Yeah.
So that's the obstacle we ran into. And I realized that it's amazing how many people can drive by and not notice your big, beautiful sign, probably because car care isn't romantic or it's not edible.
Mm-hmm.
So we were running into that, and when the announcement of COVID came. So about less than 60 days into our venture, the world was told to stay home. Now, what should have been headlines, Kelsey, about in our local news about ribbon cuttings and openings were now statements and instructions to quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
There were now orders to lock down, and they were now quirky little antidote stories about working from home in your pajamas. And that ideal working class that lived in this great community of Afton, that working class designation of workers during COVID was now hunkered down with no true idea when they would return back to work.
Mm-hmm.
So now we've got lockdowns, quarantines, curfews. These were our true foe to our business at this point in time. It's something that I'd never faced before, and I don't think it was anything anybody had faced before. So I had to get back into game planning. So I took a day away from the shop, and that's difficult for a lot of people, but it's difficult when you're first opening and you're struggling.
Mm-hmm.
A day away from the shop, I came into here to my luxurious headquarters here, and I said, I've got a plan. I've got to make a plan for what's going on. And I do believe that there was initial ripple that hurt all shops when COVID was announced. But after a while, when things kind of recovered, a few weeks recovered, some of those shops started to thrive. And when they started to thrive, they started to look for technicians.
Yeah.
If anyone doesn't know out there, there's a technician shortage, Kelsey. And one thing I realized, though, is that regardless of the strength of our team, we're the best technician in the world. And I've met a lot of best technicians in the world. They're seeking leadership. And I don't mean to sound coy, but they are the workers in need of guidance. Otherwise, they'd be the owners. Mm-hmm. I've got 2 guys who are awesome, great guys. They have no desire to own a business, and they constantly seek good leadership. So there is a difference, whether it's personality, side of brain or what have you, but there is a difference in those people. And a great worker, if you will, is valuable, and everybody's looking for them at this point. Yeah. And I knew I had to keep my team intact because I invested a lot of money and a lot of time creating a great team. But I knew this was going to be difficult. So the very first thing I did is I said, okay, I've got to become the best leader I can. And I can't just say I'm a good leader, because I say that to the reflection in the mirror and that guy can't leave.
Yeah.
Unless I become a vampire or something, and that's a whole. So I started to research, and I discovered the flood of quotes, memes, books, pamphlets telling us how to become a great leader. But great leadership begins with self-awareness. And that was the very first thing to focus on. And I don't want to get political on this, Kelsey, but I think we're witnessing a great example of leadership by watching President Zelensky of Ukraine and how he's guiding his people. His rhetoric is about support. It's about his country. It's about the future. It's about getting through this problem. Mm-hmm. And the other guy, which we don't really see, is just saber rattling and threatening, and his own people are getting tired of it. Mm-hmm. And that's about as far as I'll go, but hopefully that's enough of a take to get my point across here. COVID was my aggressor, and I had to become a good leader. And the very first thing, like I said, is self-awareness. So I had to be very aware of my language, my word choice, and my demeanor. As leaders, everything we do is amplified. In fact, our actions, they go to simply 11. That's how loud they get. And I'm going to ask you to etch this in stone. Everything you say, every message you deliver, it's delivered to a team member and their family. Don't ever forget or don't ever devalue the power of the dinner table. The dinner table is where your message is delivered to the spouse once they get home. And it's the conversations between the spouse and the team member that define your team member's loyalty and their job longevity. And there's a difference between loyalty and longevity.
Yeah.
And you have to be careful about how that message is translated across the table. This is really another podcast, but I'll touch on it. The spouse situates themselves as the third party evaluator, if you will. They look at the situation from the outside. That's their credibility, not to mention they're the spouse. So their opinions, their decisions, and their guidance will always dictate the actions of your team member. Mm-hmm. To kind of land this at home a little closer, have you ever had a team member, is anybody listening, ever had a team member or technician come in and say, I want a raise, or I don't feel I'm getting paid enough, or I need more vacation time? Where that comes from is 99% of the time, that comes from the dinner table discussion. And that third party member or that spouse who is gathering all this information and providing feedback back to your team member. Mm-hmm. So my point to all this is just be cognitive that the message that you deliver to your team is easily translated over the mashed potatoes and the side salad. Yeah. So with this in mind, I focused on the victories. Heck, guys, we had 5 cars today. Might have only been 5 cars, but guess what? None of them were personal friends or personal friend referrals. They were all unknown customers. I call them organic customers. Mm-hmm. They were customers giving us a try and their support. Those little victories are easy to explain. We saw more cars. We saw new customers. And those are the messages that I wanted to translate on a daily basis to my team so they can take it home and make sure that the translation goes easy over the dinner table.
Yeah.
That was the first thing I had to accomplish was really that self-awareness. I had to become hyper aware of me. And to be honest with you, I was dying inside. 50 years old, 3 kids, wife. I'm self-funding this excursion. If things weren't going well, we were bleeding money. Uh-huh. But I had to keep my team positive and I had to keep them productive because without my team, I don't exist.
Yeah.
And that was the first rule in really not allowing emotion to define me, because there were times throughout the day where I just wanted to let it loose. And it's that emotion or that uncontrolled emotion that often derails a leader in their business. And it's emotion that complicates the message too. Imagine sending home an emotional message to your team member to then relay to their spouse. And it's that emotion that the spouse uses to evaluate the conditions of the shop and of the workplace. So that's usually what feeds, once again, the technician coming in saying, you know, I want better pay, or that usually feeds the conversation of, what do you think that other shop is? Do you think they're a better opportunity? And they're making these decisions off of emotion without ever setting foot into the other shop, quote unquote. So that was really what my first obstacle was getting emotion out of the shop and making sure that my message that I was delivering to my team was accurate and honest, but also simple. One thing that really reinforces this, Kelsey, is years ago I had the awesome opportunity of meeting a gentleman by the name of Horst Schultz. He was the CEO of Ritz-Carlton Hotel. Sorry, he was the CEO of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, and he once told me, as a leader, we forfeit the right of emotion. And I really have always stuck that. As a leader, we forfeit the right for emotion. We cannot allow emotion to define us. And the best way to put emotion on the shelf is to identify our goal, is what we want to accomplish. One trait of all leaders: know your goals and know you will achieve them. Kind of go back with me, Kelsey, and I know I'm really going back a little farther than I think I am, because the 90s don't seem that far away. I'll go back to the movie Shawshank Redemption. Mm-hmm. Have you seen that?
Yep.
Okay. So you got Andy Dufresne. Should I even do my Morgan Freeman imitation?
Up to you.
Andy Dufresne escaped Shawshank by crawling through 500 yards of human waste sewer pipe. But he knew there was a light at the end of the tunnel. He couldn't see it, but he knew there was a light at the end of the tunnel. And that's really no different than dealing with this COVID obstacle, or dealing with manpower or woman power within our team, or dealing with problems that any of us run into with our shops. That pipe can look awful long and we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, but it's there. Mm-hmm. We got to get there, and we've got to keep our eye on that goal. And what else defines a great leader is how they conduct themselves when they're in the middle of that pipe of crap. Andy Dufresne could have freaked out, froze, and that wouldn't have got him there. Mm. We can do the same thing, and it's not going to get us there. It defines us by knowing that we will get to the end of that journey. And these are things that I kept having to tell myself throughout this time, because once again, like I said, we're not seeing customers. I'm bleeding money. I've got payroll every Friday. I've got electricity. I've got mortgage. I've got payments. It's all going out. It's just not coming in. And that's not good for business, or so they tell me. I had to really monitor my emotion. And I'm not one to yell and throw tools and discipline people in front of anyone. And I also want to make sure that we understand that when I say not to have emotion, it doesn't mean to be heartless and cold like cardboard. And I've had people ask me that question. That's compassion. We are encouraged to be compassionate to our team members, not emotional. And that's how we help improve our team. And I'll be honest with you, this was a little tough for me. And once again, I don't throw tantrums and tools, but I've spit a little fire. So I've had to suppress those sparks when the emotions got high, or in the middle of the day, when that day got long. So really what I kept going back to was that lesson from Horst Schultz about just forfeiting the right to emotion. And then also using a little bit of influence from Andy Dufresne, and also from a flight attendant named Gladys. I'll sidebar here for just a second to explain this story, because I went back to it many a times. One day I was flying out of Brownsville, Texas, up to Houston. And if you've ever made that flight, it's always rough because the wind's coming off the ocean. This particular day, there was some storms, so it was really bad out there. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a plane guy. I don't know my planes. I turboprop King Air, I think it was. There was about 12 of us on there. There were two pilots, and there was a flight attendant, Gladys. Gladys was not a day south of 70 years old. She let you know it. She told you she's been in the air for 50 years, flown around the world, flown for everybody. And Gladys was about as politically correct as a locker room of football players. The dirty jokes just came out, as natural as can be. But there were 11 guys, and we were all on it. We're tired, and she kept us laughing. And we went up into the air, and it was rough. We bounced. So much so the pilot even said, "Gladys, time to take your seat, because we're going to hit some rough ground." And Gladys goes, "Okay, whose lap am I sitting on?" So, she's completely, blue in her jokes, but it kept us laughing. Uh-huh. She kept us going the entire flight until we got into Houston, and the air smoothed out, and we landed safely. We landed at a Hobby Airport, which is Houston's smaller airport. Mm-hmm. And gathered my bags. We all gave Gladys a hug and said, great flight, and we walked on. I gathered my bags and did a few things, and as I walked out to the parking lot, sure enough, about 3 cars down, there's Gladys leaning against her car, smoking a Virginia Slim. And I said, hey, Gladys, I said, have a great day. I said, boy, you must just be immune to those bumpy flights. I said, because, man, I've flown a lot, but that one got to me. And she looked back at me and she said, no, that one got to me. I didn't like that at all. She goes, I really did not enjoy that flight. And I looked at her and said, man, Gladys, I don't want to play poker against you because you got a game face. And she explained it like this. She said, and she didn't use the word crap, but I'll use the word crap. She used it. She goes, here, this is how it works. She goes, if I lose my crap, you lose your crap. My job is to not lose my crap, so you don't lose your crap. It's as easy as that. And it hit me. She put emotion aside and put logical leadership ahead. And she did her job, and we couldn't tell the difference. And because she did her job so well, you didn't have 11 people freaking out the entire flight.
Yeah.
So that's really kind of what I took that little message with me as my guys started to get excited about the lack of cars, and then they start talking and you could see their emotions getting high. You had to keep that down. I also say this too, Kelsey, I learned that it's lonely at the top. And I don't say use the word top. I use that as a catchphrase, not as an indicator of self-perception. This is an easy starting point for anyone either starting their leadership position or has been in one for a while. Leaders cannot share their tales of woe with the group. Or more plainly put, leaders can't complain. Mm-hmm. But it feels good to complain. Sometimes it feels good just to let it off our shoulders and unload some stress. But we can't do this because it serves no purpose, translates horribly over the dinner table. Not to mention, it signals weakness. So that is something that you really have to discipline yourself, because groups of people complaining can suck you in, like a whirlpool can suck you in. And so really, that was it. My daily message was simple victories, and my leadership was to take emotion out of the game. So I thought I had that covered. So now I needed to get business in there, though. And everybody kept telling us, hey, you're essential workers. You're lucky. Well, we were essential workers with no essential customers.
Yeah.
You need one to get the other.
Yeah.
So one thing we know, and you probably know better than I do, Kelsey, is marketing does not produce overnight results. Marketing, advertising, branding, it's a long game plan, but you have to do it. Mm-hmm. And that's why you have to do it every day. No matter what day it is or what's going on in that day, no matter if you're slow or if you're booked out 5 years in advance, you must promote every single day, at least one thing a day. I learned this tough lesson while I was a sales manager for Jasper Engines and Transmissions in Houston. I moved down to Houston from St. Louis to take over a sales manager position for them. I moved down there in 2008. In 2008, the housing bubble burst. Yeah. 2008, we had cash for clunkers. We had a horrible recession. And I'm selling a premium priced product. It is not good. Mm-hmm. But I learned that there is light at the end of that pipe, even though I couldn't see it. And I learned that no matter what, I had to do the right thing every day, because sooner or later, the light will come. And I learned the lesson down there that it does work. It took a while, but it does work. And I kept going back to that, thinking about how I would wake up every day and just go do the right thing every single day, even though it felt wrong sometimes. Mm-hmm. I had to do it as if nothing else was happening in the world. And I call it the once a day method. It's going out and doing that one thing per day. We were already strong on social media. We really learned how to use Facebook. Nextdoor was really strong, and it's still our stronger attractor of business. About 90% of our business comes off Nextdoor for my original location in the Benton Park neighborhood. Oh, wow. we weren't so strong on Twitter because who's going to follow us? No one knew about us. And TikTok hadn't really busted onto the scene. But we're starting to use TikTok. We're starting to learn it and how to, focus on it. And of course, we use traditional mailers. And believe it or not, we were heavy into print ad too, because people were at home. They were reading. They had nothing else to do. I also carried a little marketing kit with me in my truck. I kept a box of them in my passenger seat. They were literature, pens, scratch pads, and they were all in a little plastic branded bag. Mm-hmm. So if you were filling up gas at a gas station and you were in a plumber van or an electrician van or something, we're going to make conversation. Mm-hmm. Everyone was a prospect. Everyone. Now, I didn't say customer. And once again, that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
Everybody was a prospect. That was the once a day method, going out there and saying, hey, I'm going to hand out 5 of these bags to people. And you, once again, you know this better than I do. Marketing, I'll define it as the umbrella for advertising and branding, but defining your business's marketing, branding, and advertising needs and efforts is really important to define those so you know what you're doing.
Yep,
and that's
absolutely.
Talking your territory there. You know that better than I do.
But you're doing a great job.
What's that?
You're doing a great job explaining it.
You just sit down and make a comprehensive list of marketing efforts. Throw it all against the wall. Just brainstorm. What do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? What customers do you want? What services do you want? What promotions do you want to do? What charitable events? What community events? Just make this massive list. It's going to be as long and big as you want. And then you ask yourself, how do I eat this thing? Well, you eat it like an elephant, one bite at a time. And one thing I did is I created a schedule. I went old school. I printed a schedule out on paper, our calendar out on paper, rather. And I wrote down one thing I wanted to do every single day. And I wouldn't stop until that one thing was done. But there are too much conundrums. There's 2 conundrums, rather, when I run into this, when I talk to some other shops. A couple of their shops said, well, I have too much business. We're booked 20 weeks out. And I say, okay, one word. Well, okay, one hyphenated word, which is kind of like 2 words, but one word, Coca-Cola. Largest advertiser in the world, largest market share. There's a reason why they do it. And the reason why they do it is because someday you might get thirsty and they want to make sure their name is in your head. It's no different than with us. No matter how booked out you are, you have to stay in that customer's head. Mm-hmm. Conundrum 2 was I spoke to a mailing company and they wanted to start a campaign, but the initial campaign was $5,000 commitment. That's a lot of money. I didn't have $5,000 to dump into traditional mailers. And the problem is that when a lot of us are faced with that commitment, and we don't take it, it stops the campaign completely. So what I could do at the time is I could spend a couple of $100 per week, and I used Vistaprint, and I utilized their mailing services, and did it in smaller bites. Instead of 5,000 mailers that first week, I did 100 of them. And then the next week I did another 100 of them. I just kept it out there. And it did prove to be successful and at least moved me forward. It wasn't a huge step moving forward, but it was at least a step forward. Mm-hmm. But I found something out. Oil change specials, tire discounts, and 10% off services wasn't working. They weren't attracting any of my customers. I had virtually 0 response on that type of ad. Didn't matter whether it was social media, it didn't matter it was mailer, print, traditional advertising, just wasn't working. The coupons and discounts I found out are ways just to simply say, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, I want your money. I'll take less of it, but I want your money. That type of advertising wasn't working for me because remember, I was still in the obscurity stage. I was a stranger asking for your money, and that's really what it was. And in a time when nothing was certain, when our own leadership couldn't give us certainty, people weren't going to make a change with a stranger on automotive repair because automotive repair is already uncomfortable enough to deal with on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. So what I was doing is I was spending money on advertising that wasn't working and money I didn't have. I had to stop. So I had to go back to the drawing board. It was a little unseasonably cool this morning at the shop. But I do remember that it was deathly quiet. The world was quiet that morning. And that avenue of 10,000 cars, that was just a desolate path of asphalt leading into an empty city scene. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure why I left it there, but I had my golf bag in the shop. So I grabbed a driver, I grabbed a ball, and I grabbed a tee. I walked out to the 4-lane road, to the center turn lane of it, the suicide lane in the middle of the fifth lane in the middle of the 4-lane road. I stood in the middle of that road and I wedged a tee into the crack of the asphalt. And from my tee box in the street, I could see the St. Louis Arch. I could see the buildings of the skyline. I couldn't see inside them, but you could feel the emptiness. There was no that. So with my best golf stance, my firm grip, ball position just left off of the front toe, I railed back and bang, I drove that ball. Best drive of my life. Right off the asphalt in the middle of that street, right off that tee. That thing went about 325 yards in the air and another 150 yards right down the street. And that ball rolled through 3 lighted intersections. And it rolled to where I couldn't see it anymore. And all throughout its journey, it never crossed paths with a car or a truck or a motorcycle or even a bicycle or even anybody walking. And that's when it hit me. My marketing epiphany hit me right at that moment. There was no one out. There was no one out in the world. It was a quiet place. No one driving their car. So yes, I was doing one thing a day, but I wasn't doing the right thing. I was doing the wrong thing. And immediately after I hit that ball and I started to think no one's out here, it took me back to a book I read years ago. The book is called Bitter Brew. It's about Anheuser-Busch and their time as, the king of beers, and being a St. Louis, and it was always an interest to me. Back in the Depression days, they had, for 2 years, they took all of their advertising money and they invested it into finding jobs and advertising for jobs and social program. They didn't once advertise beer throughout those 2 years. Mm-hmm. Invested it solely into people getting jobs. And their theory was, if you don't have a job, you don't have money. And if you don't have money, you can't buy beer. So if we can get these people working and get them to put money in their pockets, nothing's better after a hard day's work than a cold beer. And so for 2 years, they invested their money into that. And so I thought to myself, maybe I've got to do something similar. So I did in my little way. So the very next weekend, I shared a post on Facebook about my wife and I driving down to southern Missouri to a state park called Elephant Rock. It's a state park with these big granite rock formations. Mm-hmm. And the post got a little traction. People were talking about it, how beautiful it is down there, and they should get out and do it. Because the quarantines and all of that had slightly lifted up a little bit by this time we got into the summer, but people were still able to go to state parks and get outside.
Yeah.
Then the next Sunday, my wife and I decided, hey, it's a beautiful evening. We dropped the top to the car. We went out and took a drive on this road called the Great River Road over in Alton, Illinois. And it straddles the Mississippi and Missouri River to one side, and you've got these bluffs to the other. The beautiful scenic road. And sure enough, that post caught traction. And I realized I was no longer asking for money or even discounted money at this point. I was sharing experiences of living and sharing experiences of driving. And of course, every little post had a subtle call to action to it. So that was ingrained in every piece.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, they started to come to the shop. We even had customers who stopped in the shop to share pictures of their adventures. And with their permission, we posted it on social media. This was actually working. We were getting people in their cars so they had a need for their car. And we thought we were seeing the light, but we had yet to experience our biggest success by alternative advertising, if you will. And that biggest success came in the form of a big red dog. And I won't share details, but we somehow acquired a Clifford the Big Red Dog outfit. Now, this is a real authentic outfit. This wasn't anything you got out of a Halloween outfit out of Walmart. This was the suit you zipped up into, the hat, the head that you put on, the hands, the paws for the feet, 500 degrees in that thing. Clifford the Big Red Dog outfit. So I put that sucker on and started prancing up and down in front of our shop, waving to the 9 or 10 cars that were driving by.
Uh-huh.
People would honk and wave. One guy flipped us off on a daily basis until he flipped both hands one day. So we took that as a victory. It started to spread a little bit. I went to the bank one day and the lady goes, "When will Clifford be back out?" And it's like, are you kidding me? And people got to know us for having Clifford the big red dog out in front of the shop. And that grabbed attention. They at least saw our sign.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got to do something with this. So what we did is we invited moms to bring the kids out to have a contactless picture opportunity with Clifford. And the way that worked is you pull up and you texted us. We'll show you our number, and it's like whiteboard. We showed it to them. Text us your name and number. We took the picture of me standing next to the car and the kid waving out the window and so forth. And then we'll text it to you. We'll text you the picture right back. So what did we get from them? We got their name and then we got their textable number.
Yeah.
And so we ran a text campaign, and that proved to be pretty successful. And those were some of the things that we did, and it worked. But remember that once a day method? So Clifford may have been a hit, but we had to come up with a campaign for the next day. And that's the importance of creating a calendar, a calendar of events, and following that. So I'm going to back up on that a little bit. Regardless of how successful Clifford may have been, that really challenged me because I thought the next day I could skip. But you can't. And that's where that once a day method comes in. You've got to post that posting. You've got to put that mailer in the mail. You've got to proof that ad and get that going. So that was really a hard lesson from success, is that we've got to keep going. So we've got a few themes running here, but most of all, the theme I really hope that people are catching on to is the theme of daily action. Yep. As a leader, I was seeking daily victories to maintain morale, build team strength, and brand pride. As a marketer, I was seeking daily activities to promote my business and brand. But if you remember from the beginning, there were 3 takeaways. So we've got leadership and marketing. Now comes the hard part. That's me. Regardless the size of your business, regardless the accuracy of your succession plan or the layers of ownership involved, the true health of your business is your health. And this is what I really discovered throughout this time. So first things first, let me make sure we understand, Kelsey. I'm not in any position to physically advise or train anyone. This is one section that I failed horribly and I still struggle with. And throughout the past 2 years, I've let a lot of my healthy habits simply disappear. I haven't eaten really well, haven't seen the gym, haven't taken care of me. Most unfortunately, I reignited a few bad habits, like smoking. I was a past smoker for years, loved to smoke. I quit about 20 years ago. And throughout those 20 years, I've even done some sprint triathlons. I've been on the bike, I've been in the pool, I've exercised, I've gotten in good shape, but I picked it up again a little bit. Never bought a pack of cigarettes. A recovering smoker will always say that. Oh, I never bought a pack of cigarettes. Yeah, but I found enough of them throughout the guys in the shop. Yeah. And it was my comfort. And when the guys would leave the shop and it was quiet, I always thought that having a cigarette would give me a little time to think. It would give me time to philosophize, but it didn't, because you can't clearly think while your arteries are constricting. And that's the truth. You have to be healthy to have great, clear thoughts. I wasn't working out because I didn't have time. I'd work in my office until noon on a Sunday, and then I'd spend the rest of the afternoon sitting around to relax instead of finding relaxation in working out or taking a walk or something simple. I mentioned my family. I've got wife and 3 kids. I have 3 kids, and my third one's a 6-year-old. Do the math, 50 years old with a 6-year-old. He's my whoops-a-baby. I say that with a lot of love because he's a really cool little guy. And you would think that the epiphany of my health would come looking into the eyes of my youngest son's eyes, but it didn't. The epiphany of my health came from an off-the-cuff comment from my towing dispatcher, Dave. Dave's been with me since day one. He dispatches and takes care of the tow trucks and makes sure that all runs well. Dave is a guy you don't want to owe money to, big boy, until you get to know him, and then you realize his heart is as big as his structure is. And I had said something, and I was walking out of the office because we share offices at one of the shops. And I was walking out of the office, and I told him, I said, I think I'm going to go, I said, Dave, I'm done. I'm going to go walk into traffic. And I said, yeah, but if I did, it would take me 3 hours to get hit by a car because there's no one out there. He just kind of off the cuff, and he was doing something else. He said, you can't do that. And he said, you got too many people counting on you. And I still don't own a boat. And that was the epiphany. And I'll circle back to that boat comment in a bit. But as leaders, we are responsible for ensuring families of our teams are taken care of. Our team is counting on us, not only for our decisions, but for our best decisions. And those best decisions can't come without good physical condition. I know this phrase has been beaten up in the last couple of years, but there's simply too much science that proves the health of the body accompanies the health of the mind. Mm-hmm. One thing per day is what I had to really do. It can be a walk. It can be a light workout. Heck, it could be stretching and push-ups, but simply one thing a day. Like I said, I'm no personal trainer. I'm not in line to tell anybody how to live a healthy life right now because I'm still working on mine. But simple Google will, Google search will give you a good idea of what kind of program fits you. So throughout this poorly timed adventure of opening up a shop at the beginning of COVID, I had my best ideas, my best theories, and my best practices put to the test. I've been tested and challenged to become a good leader. I've been tested and challenged to become a good marketer of my brand. I've been reminded that my body is no longer 25, but I've also been reminded 50 ain't that old to take care of myself. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, I realized Dave, my dispatcher, if you remember Dave, he doesn't own a boat. And that's what this all means to me. Leadership, marketing, and health, it's all boils down to Dave and his boat. See, when you join my team, I share a story with you. And that story is about me as a young man with my father. My dad was a great guy, is a great guy. And we didn't grow up poor. We didn't grow up wealthy by any means. And we didn't grow up without, but I didn't grow up with either. And in the evening, we would drive down to this lake that was, came off of a river. We would sit on the dock and we'd watch the people in their boats bring their boats in from the lake and into the boat trailers and into the dock. And it was always fun because you'd see them bring the boats in and put them on the trailers. And then you'd see the cars spin the tires as they came up this steep dock. And keep in mind, this is the mid 70s. So this traction control and ABS weren't there. This is all, station wagons, and, spinning their tires. And we would sit out there in the beautiful evenings and watch the sun go down, and we'd talk about getting a boat someday. And, he knew, and I was too young to know, but he knew that really wouldn't happen. And so I took that lesson with me. And like I said, I can't emphasize enough, it wasn't a bad time by any means. But I took the lesson with me of what I learned down there. And I don't know if it was ever intended for me to learn this lesson or not. But I took the lesson with me, and I tell my team members, my goal is that you will be the ones on the boat, and you will not be the ones on the shore looking at everyone else on the boat. Mm-hmm. So I will help you, I will push you, I will coach you, and I will have compassion for everything you do, everything you are. That's my promise. The rest is up to you. And that's why the once a day method is so important, because if I do the right thing, my team can discover strengths and accomplishments they've never imagined. But if I fail to hone my skills, and if I avoid testing and challenging myself, then in return, my team doesn't experience great things. And if they don't know the feeling of experiencing great things, then how can I expect to provide a great experience for my customers? It all goes hand in hand. So COVID was a great experience for me as a professional. And I can only hope by sharing this quirky little story and some of the experiences from it, someone can take a few pieces of it away and help achieve their goals. So, Kelsey, I appreciate the opportunity for you letting me do this today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing kind of your journey, your story, and kind of the key elements that you kind of learned about growing your shops through such a hard and difficult time. I'm sure there's a lot of stress there. And but I love that you had kind of a very firm and strong foundation. There was never a moment where I needed to really interject. I just let it roll. Everything that was going on was really good. And so, um,
Well, I do want to make a side note. I do not have the complexion of an Oompa Loompa. There is some bad lighting in my studio right now. Okay, I just want that out there, just for vanity purposes.
I love that.
Just for vanity purposes.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we you just preach about being healthy, we know you're healthy. So
Blood pressure.
I do love the idea of just kind of the once a day method and daily action. That kind of reminds me a lot of like a couple books that I've read, but probably the one most related to is probably Atomic Habits in terms of just marginal gains each and every day, 1% better. What can you do 1% better today? And that just has a compound effect over time that as you improve and next thing you know, you're when you look back at your journey, like look how far I've come because I have just improved little by little over time.
And boy, you're talking about a whole other podcast on that. That is a huge lesson to practice and also share with our teams
Mhm.
because people complain a lot about the younger generation, work ethic and so forth. It isn't necessarily the younger generation, it's what the younger generation experiences. And I think they're not familiar with that 1% rule. You see TikTok stars who promise you do it for 30 days and you'll see millions. You
Mhm.
see people who develop apps who get billions within months. There's a great little outline of, talking about people from the industrial age making their money versus people from the current technological age making their money.
Mhm.
What took them 60 years in the industrial age has taken them 60 months in the technology age. The meaning behind that meaning is that they become accustomed to that instant gratification. And really, we have to reteach our team members that it does take that 1% rule is in effect. And that's I think that's real life, to be honest with you.
Yeah, man, I 100% agree. I mean, it's a like this is the nature of just how easily accessible information is with our smartphones and things. It's like we're just so used to getting the answers immediately and getting that instant gratification. And so the fact I think when a lot of people hit roadblocks, they're just like, wait, why am I hitting this roadblock? Why can't I solve it right away? Like they just
Mm-hmm.
struggle with that. And so I love what you've been able to share today in terms of just doing little things and like even yes, you are doing things once a day, but then you realize, wait, I'm not doing the right thing once a day. That's also an important thing to be able to take a step back and understand that, oh, wait, I need to maybe adjust the path that I was doing once a day and reap the benefits of trying something different.
And that was the big thing too, is because I was reading books, I was following guidelines, and it should have been working, but it was, and now it does. Now that we have a little bit of establishment
Yep.
and credibility, but for the time, it just wasn't the vehicle we needed to get us through that. Yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah, and I was also curious in terms of your first shop. You mentioned how like day one you opened the doors, people were coming. What did you do? Did anything happen there that allowed that to happen right on day one?
Well, and that's so that shop did struggle through COVID a little bit. We but it didn't get impacted as hard. I think the reason why that one took off is once again, the city of St. Louis has a lot of old neighborhoods. And for many years, there was a lot of flight from the old neighborhoods. And now they're coming back. And like I said, they're gentrified. They're coming back and they're building. But what happens is there's a lot of retail services that won't come back in until there's a true proven upward trajectory of income, of property value, and things like that. Therefore, you're not going to have your big name shops, come into these neighborhoods. And the only thing left are maybe little, what we call alleyway mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
So when we came in and took an abandoned building and repainted it and put in new awning and redid, I mean, the lobby, the lobby, you feel like you're in a hotel lobby, and we cleaned the shop and we lined the cars out front. Just the image just the dress we put on it took that one to the dance. I mean, that's really what got us off the ground. Now we have to back it up with good service.
Yeah.
And the gentleman I have down there does an awesome job. I mean, at customer service, and people know him by first name and they love him. And it's that type of neighborhood shop that really ran well.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have a lot of competition either. And so, that is the magic behind that one booming so fast. But in the same breath, I mean, like I said, we were getting a lot of business from Anheuser-Busch, which is just a few blocks down.
Mm-hmm.
People come to work, they bring their cars, we take them back to work, we pick them up after work, and so forth. And COVID hurt because all of a sudden they just stopped going to work.
Yeah.
And so it did take a little bit of a dip, but it had a natural, it was one of those shops that just took off. And a lot of people experience that. I've had the opportunity of opening up shops with a great franchise company, and you would see that some shops would just, boom, take off, and then others would take a little longer to get down the runway.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, thank you for sharing that. And so, I guess that just to sort of recap here, and wrap this up, if you just had one piece of advice that you could give to another shop owner, what would that golden piece of advice be?
I think the piece of advice would just be follow that once a day plan and take the time to step away from your shop for the day and brainstorm. Those are healthy days throughout the month. I do it today. I utilize that as one of my days. Step away and brainstorm all day. Get somewhere where you can, if you have an office at home or something like that. And follow that once a day plan. That's really the one piece of advice, is make that calendar and stick to it. Don't let the day finish until you've done that. And it's tough. It's tough. It really is.
Yeah.
But especially what's tough about that is not encountering a shortcoming, because I think that keeps the fire going a little bit more. Okay, we didn't get that many people off that mailer. We got to try this, this approach. What really the obstacle is moving forward is the victories. When we did that Clifford victory and that texting program that really came back, I mean, the ROI on that was ridiculous. That was hard to get up the next day and say, okay, on to the next challenge, because we feel, drunk with victorious emotion. So yeah, be careful that your victories don't slow you down either. For those of you in the sales world, that's an old salesman's thing. If you sell something, or if you close a deal, that's your day to keep moving harder than ever. Don't stop to celebrate, because you've got momentum. And that's the same with this as well.
Awesome. Well, I love that. Well, thank you so much, David, for being on with us today. If anyone wanted to possibly reach out to you, what would be the best way for them to contact you?
Facebook's always the easiest, or if you want to get a hold of me, probably email is the best. And that is, and I'll walk through this slowly because my name is long. It is David E. So it's my name, and E for Eschbach. So it's DAVIDE, and then it's at, and this is all spelled out. It's spirit1corp.com. So it's spirit, SPIRIT, 1 ONE. So it's spelled out. And then corp, C as in cat, ORP as in Peter.com. Send me an email, hook up with me on Facebook if you have any questions. I'm always there. I was taught many years ago, help a ton of other people thrive, and you will too. So that's what I try to live by.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, David. And for those of you, if you could please just subscribe to our channel to make sure that you're connected to any other future webinar, podcasts, that would be greatly appreciated. But take care, guys. Thanks for joining us. Bye.
Thank you, Kelsey.